professional degree in architecture and also a master's in computer-aided design. And then I worked in London for a few years. I actually graduated in 1989. So you can guess my age, but don't worry about that one. It doesn't matter. And got married there and worked in London for a while. And then we moved. My husband had an opportunity to come and work in the States, which came to lecture in one of the universities. And then it was just for a year, and then he got an opportunity to go back to Tanzania. And for me, it was a golden opportunity because I've always wanted to go back home. And we went back to Tanzania. I started a practice in 1994 at the time. And then eventually I joined forces with another partner. And now we have 3 partners in our office. Now it's now called Epitome Architects Limited. And we have been operating there since. It's a fairly big company for Tanzanian standards, not for American standards, because in Tanzania we don't have big architecture firms. We don't normally have big architecture firms because you don't know when you get a big job and when you know that's how the economy is. But for Tanzanian standards, I think we're the largest in terms of employment in architectural consultancy. We are very privileged to have many good clients. We work with the World Bank, we work with the USAID. I heard about the USAID. We work with a lot of American entities, Abbott Fund, CDC, because we do a lot of health-related projects. We do corporate projects. We work with a lot of embassy. We really work with a lot of international organizations, and we have been very blessed because we are those people who, I just heard a colleague downstairs who were talking about how to work in Africa and how about the issue of corruption. And it depends with your stand. And we are a Tanzanian company, but we have said no to corruption and we don't compromise, and we are zero tolerant, is that the word? Yeah. And we have had to, so hence our clients are a particular client base. And we are and people have said about Africa and corruption, but it depends. If you have a stand, and I think people will accept who you are and they will look into your work and you will get jobs. And we are getting jobs. And we're working actually with government jobs and government entities as well. We're working with ministries. We're working with very big pension funds in Tanzania who are really the big developers. And we also do development. So, yes, I'm not really an expert in infrastructure, roads and but I'm an architect and I will do what I can.
We'll go through that.
Now I've moved to Nigeria. I've started an office there because my husband is operating in Nigeria, and we've started as a developer as well as looking for architectural consultancies. We've just put our feet in Nigeria.
That's all part of the infrastructure, because if the World Bank, the United Nations in July gave their 2050 and beyond forecast and talked about, actually I was in Nigeria when that report was released, talking that of the 9 fastest growing countries, about 6 or 7 of them will be in Africa. It talked about that if present forecast holds, by 2050, Nigeria might surpass the population of US. Taking context, Nigeria, depending on where you're getting your numbers, about 180, US close to 300. Can you imagine that? I was talking to somebody, if you're from Nigeria, know that, and I told him, I said, can you imagine the population of Lagos doubling? And the rest of them. So infrastructure means not only roads, it also means the houses. It also means the schools. It also means the hospitals and all the other things that you would need to get it done. This is a little bit about me, and I think you have it in the profile. But the point that I'd like to make with this slide is that we are in a global economy. Africa is in a global economy, and transportation investment is very critical for us to compete, for us to get our share of economic development. To the extent that we don't understand that transportation or infrastructure investment, we are not, or Africa is not going to be able to competitively compete, and it makes a different thing. So it does, at the end, means higher competitiveness. Our ability to do that, when you look at India, you look at China, because they developed part of their infrastructure, they can compete. Sometimes jobs are, go over there because labor is cheaper, or, to get things done. The key is what we're talking about in infrastructure is key. If this population growth holds, or even if it's 50% of that, without a thriving economy, without a thriving infrastructure, we are going to face a very strong uphill battle. I'd like to lay the foundation as we talk about infrastructure. In the Western world, particularly in US in practice now, we encourage our government and the rest to see infrastructure as an investment. It's an asset that needs to be managed. And that's where my experience this year, I've gone to Nigeria. Actually, next month, I'll be on my way to Rwanda and to Uganda, all about talking about infrastructure, and what we need to do is to understand that this thing is asset. It is an investment that is made with an intention of reaping some dividends. Some of those could be economic development, faster, competitiveness, cost. Some of them could be to allow us to enhance our social conditions and welfare. But at the end of the day, we need to think about asset. And when we look at, and that's the other side in Africa, when we are constructing, when we are planning, the area I've helped them in the past, is to think about the life cycle, all the way from when you dream or think, where you locate your infrastructure, to how you would use it, to how at the end of that infrastructure life, what you do with it. Now, that's an area that African governments really need to think through, about that asset, how you manage it, and how you also understand that their purpose is to really serve the customer. If it's a roadway piece, is the driving public, how do we give them that travel? How do we save their life? How do we make it easy? This whole asset and how you do get it is the area that I find we struggle. But if our system is going to be competitive, we must think about the customer, we must think about safety, we must think about reliability. And we have to think about cost effectiveness. Do you know that as difficult, and if you want to say as poor as the African continent is projected or is, in many cases, it takes about 2 to 4 times, depending on where you are in Africa, to build the same level of a roadway piece as you would build in the Western world. Part of it is corruption, but also part of it is not understanding the true cycle and building in what it takes to get the job done. And so we have to think through that asset. We have to think through who we want it to focus on, and we have to think about cost effectiveness and when we bring it in. So it's the customer. We want to think about the level of service that we're giving them, the service delivery, how we are going to maintain that facility, and how we are going to operate that facility. It has to be reliability. Looking at the condition of that asset, life cycle modeling, preserve. Somebody was asking me, Chidi, I rode with him. Once I was driving in Nigeria, I had a taxi was taking me, and they were constructing a roadway. So I saw the construction of that roadway going on. I told the taxi guy, I said, stop me. He said, so I thought you said you were still about a mile away from where you said you were going. I said, I know. Just stop me. Gee, that's about Owerri Road. Okay. He stopped me. So I started walking around the thing and just walked around. And when I came back to States, I told my friends, I said, they're building this road. I give it 6 months. And I went back a year, they're still working on that road, repeating what they did. And the simple problem with that was drainage. You can construct without thinking about drainage. As soon as it rains, the whole thing turns back. So you really have to think about what you're doing, how reliable it was. In that particular case, maybe they gave them money and they didn't do something with, but that was pure, simple issue that needed to have been looked at. You know, you have to think about the cost. And I find that many cases, understanding the financing and the budgeting, the capital programming and prioritization, sometimes we need human capacity building in order to help our people do that, to end down with a plan. Safety is another issue. It's amazing the number of people we have lost in African roads due to little things that one can take care of. If you drive in Africa, watch the age of our ending of our road, and it's unforgiving. Make that mistake and wave off, you're done. The shoulder, some basic things that we have to think through how we construct and build those things. But let's get down to some of the issues that we're dealing with today. This is why sometimes you find out that we have raw materials, we have people, and yet we are not able to compete in the global economy. Just the cost of transport alone represents, in some African countries, more than 50% of the cost of the product. And you look at it, as blessed as we are, if we had a good transportation system, some of the African countries can easily import roses to this country. We don't appreciate roses as much as the Americans do or the Western world, but we can't, just the cost alone. And when you get to this 50% and the unreliability of the system itself, it makes it very difficult for us to compete. This is one of the reasons, if we are going to compete, if we're going to get our things, exported and gotten out, we have to pay attention to the infrastructure. Nuru will talk briefly after I've made a few comments about Nigeria, about Tanzania, and some of the condition of the infrastructure now, before we begin to get into the next phase of how might we address them. This is Global Competitiveness Index, where they looked at 148 countries in terms of their level of investment. Look at, and I'm taking Nigeria as an example, one of the big things. When you look at our overall infrastructure, they rated us 129 out of 148. And yet this is a country on our way, if projections hold, to be third, fourth largest country in the world. And yet when you look at our infrastructure, you can see the quality of our railroads, the quality of our port infrastructure, the transportation system. They ranked infrastructure inadequacy as the #1 challenge for doing business. It's getting through to get to where you need to go. See, several years ago when I was in Michigan. I relocated to Atlanta. I lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I worked in downtown Detroit, 40 miles. I did that for 20-something years. It didn't take me more than an hour. If I was living in Nigeria, it would be very difficult to maintain that type of schedule and do it within that time frame. What does that mean? It limits my options. And so you look through that, that's part of the global ranking. When you look at infrastructure development, and you look at Nigeria, you look at Malaysia, the other thing that is very interesting about the African countries, if you take many of the African countries and you wind us back 50 years ago, 40 years ago, we were ahead of many of the countries, the Asian tigers and all, we were ahead of them. But when you begin to look here, so it takes population of Nigeria, Malaysia, Netherlands, South Korea, just as an example. You look at the landmass, you look at the population, you look at this is an example of what we invest. If you take it as a stock that is being invested, Nigeria is 33. Look at Malaysia. You wonder where Malaysia is, where they are today. Look at Netherlands. Look at South Korea. The message here is that this is almost 3 times, 2-3 times that level. That tells you the opportunity, both the challenge and the opportunities that is in Africa. I told you that I travel quite a bit. The last time I went was during the Ebola crisis in November. I was doing a special seminar at the University of Port Harcourt for a week. But I got an opportunity to see a draft report of the Nigerian long-range infrastructure plan, the 2040. And part of what they talked about is that they would need $3 US trillion, billion dollars to get things done. 3 trillion. That's what it would require. And they laid out, I thought that this was fairly well done. They laid out by asset class, the different groups or different areas where how much will be needed to keep pets and to advance. Remember the last slide, we said they were at least 2.5 times behind what they should be doing. So they laid all these things out on what needs to happen. So before I go to the next level, I wanted to ask Nuru to make some comments about, this is Nigeria. Let's see example of, given what she knows, what about Tanzania and the state of conditions?
I can
Yeah.
project it.
Oh, okay, you can use it. You can actually put it on the next one. So let's see how we do what?
It's here, so it's easy for me
To present it. Which one is that? It must be this one.
investment opportunities.
This one.
What do I use to?
No, you can use this. Go this and this.
And how do I?
Just keep talking.
And how you will press it for me? Very quickly, I managed to put something about Tanzania. What I would do, I would
I'd
just...
like to make a comment. She's so industrious. She pulled this thing together in the last few minutes and called people different. So, but I told her we'll swing it.
I just zoomed in into Tanzania so you can get a fair idea of Tanzania and the challenges we're facing. And I always believe wherever there's challenges, then there's a great opportunities of investment. And I think that's the line we're looking at the moment. Africa is full of challenges, but is a gold mine in terms of investment. So that's why I've said the summary report, investment opportunities, infrastructure in Tanzania. Pardon me for any grammar mistakes or whatever. I really did pull it very quickly. Can I go to this quickly? Yeah, very quickly. Tanzania is an East African country. It's bordered by Kenya, Uganda on the north, as you can see, Rwanda, Burundi, Congo, Zambia, Mozambique. It's a very blessed country because it's bordered by, it has lakes on either side, Lake Malawi or Lake Nyasa, you can call it, Lake Tanganyika, Lake Victoria, and it has the Indian Ocean. So we're surrounded by water, but one of the biggest challenges we have is water. That's our biggest challenge. 51 million in terms of population. We speak Swahili and English. GDP, you can see not much, $127 billion. I will not go into that. I'm not a finance man. Don't ask me what it means. But mostly we are very rich in agriculture, minerals, tourism. We have a big sector in tourism. It's world renowned, Ngorongoro, Serengeti, Mount Kilimanjaro. And we fishing, we have huge agricultural land. It's a gold mine for investment. continue. I will not go into the road networks. This is courtesy AICD report, and this is just a very quick overview of the issues that we're facing in terms of the achievements that we have done, we've made, and also the challenges that we're facing in Tanzania. But I'll go item by item, so if you can go. The first, let's zoom in roads. Roads is part of infrastructure, and I think it's very crucial for any development of any country. Tanzania has done something on roads. I think we're one of the East African countries. Our roads are not so bad for African standards. Why? Because Tanzania managed to come up with a road fund, as well as an agency that overlooks the road networking, and a lot of money. The budget, there's a big budget that goes into these agencies to cater for infrastructure. Also, they've established a fuel levy that we pay whenever we buy fuel. We pay, some money goes into the kitty to maintain the roads. But it's still a huge, though there's a lot of money going into the maintenance and building of roads, there's a huge challenges. As you can see, the road fund, money is not sufficient to maintain the roads. Collection is a problem. Evasion of the fuel levy, of course, Africa, we have our own way sometimes of doing things. When you're about to go straight this way, some people go around the other way. And also there's a big problem of rural road connectivity. Tanzania connects intercity. There are good roads between city to city, but when it comes to the rurals, it becomes a little bit of a problem. That's a challenge. Continue. Port. Tanzania has we're very well located in terms of port. It's in the east. It's along the Indian Ocean in the city's commercial capital called Dar es Salaam, and it is actually the major regional port for Eastern and Southern Africa. So it's a huge, it's a huge potential to be this one big port that can really cater for the surrounding countries. It handles, as you can see, at 2009, it handled about 5 million tons. It's growing very rapidly. And what the government has done, the government is trying to do something within its capacity. It could do more. But what it has done, it has invited the private sector, because by itself, the government could not be able to run the port in the way it's supposed to run. So it invited the private sector to operate the container terminal. And that has helped a bit. But still, big challenges because there's a rapid growth of traffic. Tanzania trade is growing. We have recently discovered gas, and we're going into agriculture, and there's so many other things. So there's a growth of traffic. So the ports cannot contain it. There's the issue of capacity. As you can see, pure linkages, of course, of the road networks between inland transportation networks to take things to the rural areas. Regional interconnection is also a problem. So we still have huge potential for investment in that area. Continue. Power. Power is also a big thing, as you heard about. Somebody was joking about NEPA in Nigeria, called NEPA. Something NEPA is what?
Never expect.
Never expect, power always. TANESCO, we have equivalent to that is called TANESCO, Tanzania Electric Supply Company Limited. We haven't given it a nickname yet because I think they're trying. It's not as bad, but it could be better. It could be much better. It used to be really bad many years ago. And of recent, they've introduced gas. We're now gas-powered. They're using gas to power the turbines. Don't ask me so much. I'm not so much into this, but I know it's improved of recently. We don't get as many power outages as we used to get, but it's still not good. It could get so much better. Again, there's a lot of problem, low power consumption, limited electrification. Not all the areas in Tanzania are electrified. There are many, many areas that still need to. I remember as a developer, we were doing a project, and it was just on the outskirts. It's actually within the city, Dar es Salaam, but it wasn't so far away, and there was no power there. So we had to get this company to get us power. into that development. Oh, it was a hustle. And now once power got there, the development started around that area. Those are the challenges we face, me as a developer, and architects, and all the investors, power. But it's getting better. It used to be very unreliable. As I said, this is 2010 statistics, but as of today, government has tried. We used to be reliant in hydropower, but now we're switching into gas. So 2 weeks ago, there was a big switch from hydro to gas, and that has been a rejoice to Tanzanians. Obviously needs expansion and diversification, and hidden costs in underpricing, because there's a lot of hidden costs in underpricing, there's a collection losses and distribution losses. Those are the challenges that needs to be taken care of. Water is a big challenge in Tanzania. Where I live, you don't know when you'll get water. We're grateful, sometimes we do, but there's so many other areas in Dar es Salaam, and this is a city that you don't get water, and water has become a real big challenge. Tanzania, the government has done some reforms in this area, but there's been a problem in terms of poor management of the company. The company is not being well managed, poor budget execution, as you can see there, has resulted in funding not being effected. There's also a big challenge on access to clean and safe water. The water is not clean, is not safe. You have to boil water. Even when you want to brush your teeth in the morning, we normally use boiled water. It's life we're used to, but I think it's something that needs to be done, and this is one of the sectors that has a great investment opportunities. ICT, ICT has improved tremendously in Tanzania since this report was done. There's been a substantial progress. At the time, many years ago, even in the villages, ICT, mobile phones were not available. I mean, in Africa, we all come from villages. I think African brothers here know. Or our parents come from villages. So when you want to get in touch with your person in the village, it was very difficult to call because there were no mobile phones then. But now, there were more than one service providers in our villages. And I have a joke. One day I was in Zanzibar. Zanzibar is part of Tanzania. And I went to, I think we were together with my husband. I can't remember. My daughter is there, by the way. We have a whole family here. She's a Yeli. So we're very grateful for that. We went to it was an internet cafe. And there was a Maasai guy wearing a Maasai robe, and he was on the internet. So it just shows you how wide the ICT has gone. So it's one of those things Tanzania is not doing so badly. The prices used to be very high, but now they've gone down a bit. Conclusion, yes. We require an annual investment of the order of 2.4 billion for the 10 years. There's a lot of good opportunities in investment. The power sector, as I've said, water, ICT, ports. There's a big drive there's a big master plan. We're moving the port from Dar es Salaam to a city, a very historical city called Bagamoyo. And this is now creating will be a satellite city around that port. And this is one of the big things we're doing. There were talks of moving airports, and there's so many different policies the government is putting in investments and the plans that they have. I don't have them in specific right now, but it's a gold mine for investment. So I invite you, my brothers and sisters, whoever has any opportunity, to look into this market. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me get this.
Oh.
I think she did a wonderful job giving just a few minutes to get it together. The summary of all the things she said and we're talking about is that there are unmet needs in Africa, and that Africa is not stagnant. And those needs would need to be met, and it will be met in various ways. And that African countries by themselves, even at their best, cannot meet those needs by themselves. I happen to have been practicing in U.S. Even in U.S., for all its richness, the government by itself have not met all the infrastructure needs. And so the challenge and the opportunity that we have is that public sector in Africa and public sector everywhere, just not just Africa, public sector everywhere have not kept up with the pace of growth in infrastructure to remain competitive. And the challenge and the opportunity is for us sitting here to find how we can create that. But the government has a role to play. And when in these meetings that I've been fortunate to go and speak, is to create that enabling environment. To create that enabling environment that would allow private sector to participate in Nigeria, in any place else. I had the privilege once of having the Vice President of Liberia come to the office when I was in Detroit to speak. And his goal was trying to convince me, working for this, to locate an office in Liberia. And the question is fairly simple. Businesses look at, can we make money? Businesses are really non-profit. It's not a non-profit charitable organization. It's, can we make money? Are there fair conditions? And can we really make positive contribution? And at that particular time, we talked about issues, and I was mentioned, I can come to Liberia, but I don't think it's the right time to invest. There are a few things that we needed to do, including human capacity. If you're asking an American company to come in and locate a factory, are we going to put things, the guy that talked about, getting the middle management, the blue collar, getting them ready, they are the ones that really build the factory. They are the ones that really build the roads. They are the ones, and when you don't have those, it becomes extremely difficult and extremely expensive to do. And the government really needs to create the enabling environment. And that was part of the discussion today, that African governments are trying. They are not where we would like to see many of